guess what? We're going to look at Mary and Martha this week because I think they have a great story as we are continuing our series, Running on Empty. And this week our subtitle is, You Can't Give What You Don't Have. Now doesn't that sound like it makes sense to us? You really can't give something you don't have. But don't we often try? We'll try to do something even though we're not able, or we'll say yes to doing something even though that we know we don't have time. Or maybe you even say yes to doing something and you don't have the skill set to do it. More than once, I bet we have tried to give something when we knew very well we didn't have it, or we couldn't really give it. It seems simple enough, but we often try to do this anyway. We try to do more, we try to make more fit in, or we try to stretch further than we were really meant to stretch. And I bet right now you guys are thinking of some times that has happened to you, right? Thinking of some times when you tried to do more than what you really felt like you could do. And sometimes it feels like you're always expected to say yes. It feels like no is a bad word sometimes. And I love the Hyundai commercial that's been out recently. Maybe you guys have seen it. They're in the office setting, and all of a sudden the guy actually leaves work at 6 o'clock, and everybody goes over the window and they're watching him leave. And they say, well, at what point did leaving work on time become an act of courage? Right? At what point did that become an act of courage? Something that we might feel like we could do. But the reality is the busyness that we have, the things that we try and fit, we always feel pressure to do more and more and more. And what happens is it drains us. We end up running on empty. In fact, it's phrases that I hear from people, and I shared with you how we started this because I was there, Pastor Brian was there, and we were sitting there talking to him, and I feel like I've got nothing left. And we realized we weren't the only ones. We weren't the only ones who felt like we had been running on empty. Well, busyness, or trying to be everything to everybody, will certainly leave us running on empty. And today I want to look at Mary and Martha again. Lazarus is not in this story. This time it's a little different setting. Jesus and the disciples are traveling, and as they are traveling, they decide to drop in to Mary and Martha's home, or to Martha's home, and everything seems to fall apart in that moment. So if you have your Bibles, Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Luke 10:38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Unexpected company. I highly doubt that Jesus called ahead to make reservations. I don't think that he sent one of the disciples and said, hey, you know what, you run on ahead, tell Mary and Martha we're coming, get everything ready. We'll be there in about an hour. I don't think that's what happened. They had no heads up that Jesus and his disciples were on their way. There was a knock at the door, or maybe a friendly hello through the window, and Mary and Martha had company. They had Jesus and the disciples. And it's this image that I have of Martha welcoming them into the home. The way I have always seen the story, she welcomes everyone in, makes them feel at home, and then she does what any good hostess would do. She slips into the kitchen and begins to prepare some food. She wants to have something for her guests, even though she wasn't planning on them, even though they hadn't RSVP'd. She wanted to have something to offer her guests. It was probably dinner time. It was she needed something to feed them. And she did exactly what the rest of us would do. She expected her sister to follow. Because when company comes in, the code is that you feed them. It really was in that day. You were expected to feed those who would show up to help you. And so Martha is in the kitchen working away, expecting any second to see her sister pop through the door. Only she doesn't come. I thought, oh, she's just talking, she'll be here in a minute. And she continues her preparations, and Mary doesn't come. I wonder if at this moment, if Martha started to make some extra noise. You guys are laughing because that's happened, hasn't it? Someone has been in the other room and you needed some help, and rather than just saying, hey, would you come in and join me, you move the pots a little louder. Maybe you accidentally drop the spoon on the floor, or slam the cupboard door a little louder, just to send some of those non-verbal cues. Hey, I could use a little help in here. Mary either doesn't get it, or she doesn't hear it, or she just chooses to be with Jesus. We don't know which one it is exactly. But regardless, she doesn't come. And so I picture Martha racketing up the noise in there, getting a little louder, definitely getting more frustrated and angry, because now she has how many unexpected house guests, and she's doing it by herself. That no good sister of mine, she never helps every time this happens, and that is the reel that I picture Martha playing to herself. Jesus just pops in, I'm glad he's here, but I wasn't planning on this. And where is that sister of mine to help me? What is she doing? Why isn't she helping? How dare she be in there just listening? She needs to be out here with me working. I can't do all this on my own. This isn't fair. You hear her playing. Have you ever played those tapes to yourself? Oh yeah. You don't even have to raise your hand. I mean, I know. We have all played that to ourselves. It may not be in the kitchen. It could be in the work setting. It could be helping with the kids. It could be doing anything that we do. We play those reels in our head of, why am I doing this alone? Why don't I have any help? Doesn't anybody care? Doesn't she notice? And she mutters and mutters and mutters. And probably she was chewing Mary out pretty good in her head, right? She was really, really giving it to her, saying, I can't believe you're doing this. Again, we are going to talk after Jesus leaves. Because that's all happened, right? This will not happen again. And I picture her bursting out into the room, maybe wooden spoon in hand, going up to Jesus. Lord, don't you care that my sister isn't helping me? Don't you care? Jesus, is it really okay that she's not helping me? Why doesn't it bother you that I'm in here making all this noise, making food for you, Jesus? And she's not in here helping me. Why doesn't it bother you? Aren't you going to make her help me? I love this now because Allie and Alex, they're doing this. They do this right now, especially Allie. Alex is just good at just walking away, and he doesn't talk enough to really say it. But Allie will say, I didn't make this part of the mess. Shouldn't Alex help clean this up? It's exactly what siblings do. It's exactly what people do in all kinds of settings. It doesn't matter if it's church work or if it's work or if it's volunteer work. Why am I the only one doing this? Jesus, if you cared, you'd send me help. That's what Martha is saying. Don't you care? Doesn't that echo the words of last week? Jesus, if you had been here. If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. I love Mary and Martha because they remind us of real life. These are words we can relate to. Lord, don't you care? Here I am worrying. Here I am struggling. Here I am doing this thing for you, Jesus. I am making you food and your disciples. Don't you care that she's not helping? Do you notice the guilt that Martha's throwing in there? Because we do that. Don't you care? Boy, what words to say to Jesus. Because one of the things that we often talk about in the Christian church is how much Jesus cares about us. And yet the words out of Martha's mouth, Lord, don't you care? She's had enough. She hit her breaking point. She's angry, but more importantly, she's empty. Because let's be honest, we may have those moments, but they're in our bad moments. There are when things are going wrong. There are things when we are run dry. There are words that we say whenever we have given and feel like we have nothing left to give. For all we know, Martha had worked hard all day long and was exhausted when Jesus and the disciples showed up. We have no idea what her day had been or what she had planned the next day. All we know that is in this moment, she hits her breaking point. And she reaches out with words that we can relate to. Lord, don't you care? 3 things that are going on in Martha's life. If you have your bulletins, you want to write them down. I think they apply to us too. I don't know why preachers always do 3. We do. I could do 4 or 5, but I think 3 fits really well right here. First thing that I see going on in Martha's life, thinking that no one cares. Not even Jesus, thinking that no one cares. And man, when we do that, when we fall into the, oh, woe is me, no one knows how bad it's been. No one knows the trouble I see, right? No one knows the trouble I have. Martha's doing it right here. She was singing that song in the kitchen. No one cares what I'm doing here. No one cares. They hear the pots. They hear the noise. Oh, I'm sure Mary knows. No one cares. We do it all the time. No one cares about what I'm doing. Second, doing more than needs done.
Amen.
What amazes me is Jesus doesn't walk in here and say, Martha, Mary, we are glad to see you. I expect dinner on the table in an hour. Jesus doesn't say that. In fact, Jesus' response to Martha is, I see that you're upset, but only one thing needs to be done here right now. You're worried about lots of things, and only one thing is important. And then by his words that Mary has chosen what is more important, I don't think it was dinner. I don't think Jesus was concerned about having dinner. We know that Jesus fed 5,000, right? 5,000 men plus all the women and children who were there. If Jesus was really hungry, do you think he would have demanded that Martha make something for him? No, absolutely not. Who decided that all this needed to be done? She did. And who often does that in our own lives?
We do.
Very good application. Because if we don't understand it, it doesn't count, right? If we don't use it and apply it. You guys are so good. I'm proud of you for that one. Just kind of slipped it right in there too. She did all this, and we do it too. We fill our lives with doing more things than need to be done. It's not that this stuff is unimportant. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's not that it is even outright sinful. It's just doing more than needs to be done. And because Martha was fixated on making a meal, on making everything that they needed, she missed a lot. She missed out on so much. She missed out on Jesus. I have this feeling that as Jesus and the disciples were traveling, they stopped at Mary and Martha's not to get a good meal, but to get good fellowship. By this point, everyone is starting to get angry with Jesus. The Pharisees have really taken notice. He is offending people left and right, and the plot is developing quicker and quicker to kill him or to get rid of him or do whatever it takes so that they don't have to deal with this man. And when things are getting rough, don't we long for our friends? Don't we long to go spend time with people who care, who love us, that we can kick our shoes off and be ourselves? I have the feeling that the reason Jesus and the disciples stopped was because they loved Mary and Martha. To be with them, to spend time with them. And here Martha misses it. And she's getting angry and trying to ruin it for everyone by doing more than needs to be done. And the third thing I see here, she's tired, she's angry, she's frustrated. That to me is working without worship or rest. Working without rest, working without worship. I would say rest for those who are non-believers, because I think everybody needs rest. But I think working without worship for believers, we're missing something, and we know it. When we give and give and give, and we never stop to be filled or to spend time with Jesus, it leads us to a very bad place. And these three things will lead us to a disaster every time. And Martha was in the midst of her own disaster. She prepared it, she cooked it, she let everyone else enjoy it, right? And she came out, busted into the room. Don't you care? Boy, if we're honest, we've had those moments when everyone suffered because we were doing things all wrapped up in us. Thinking that no one cared, or doing more than needs to be done, or not taking time to worship or rest. I love that Jesus addresses Martha with compassion. I don't think that he really scolds her here. I think he uses it as an opportunity to teach her and to help her understand something. They're friends, remember? Martha, Martha. And I think that Martha had hoped that maybe Jesus would set the world right. And by setting the world right, what do I mean? He would order Mary into the kitchen. And that Jesus would follow suit with everything she wanted to have done. That's not what Jesus does at all. In fact, he stops the whole discussion. And he turns it right back around to Martha. Martha, here is the problem. Here is what's going on. It's not your sister. You can blame your sister if you want to blame your sister, but let me tell you what's going on. You are upset. You are worried about many things. Your sister has picked a good choice, and I'm not going to take it away. I would have loved to have been a mouse in that room to see what Martha did after that. The scriptures don't tell us. Did she stand there for a moment? I mean, sometimes when someone speaks words of truth like that into your life, we get that deer in the headlights look, don't we? We don't know quite how to process it. This is not what I had planned. Jesus, you were supposed to tell her to go in the kitchen and help me, not to tell me what's wrong with me. Did she sit down? Or did she go right back to the kitchen? Did she stay and enjoy some of the fellowship and enjoy some rest with her friends? Or did she go back to work? We don't know. We don't know what she did. But here's what we're left with. Martha's choice of making dinner versus sitting and listening. Of all the places that Jesus could have stopped that night, of all the places that he could have gone, he went to their home, and Martha got a lesson that she probably never forgot, and that we hopefully learned something from. I'm convinced that Jesus stopped for more than just food. He stopped for more than just a meal. It was because he knew them. In fact, what I have pictured here is what we read in Revelation 3:20. I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. Do you understand that that verse was originally written to the church? We have used that as a verse for unbelievers, as a verse to come to Christ, but that verse was written for the church. It wasn't written for people who didn't know. It was written for people who did. They already know who Jesus is. And he's standing on the outside, hey, I want to come in and spend time with you. And I think it's what we see right here embodied in this text. Jesus stood outside their home and said, I want to come in and be with you tonight. I want to come in and sit and spend time with you and talk and tell stories and teach and learn and grow. And I love that he knocked and they opened the door and invited him in. And then we see the split from there. Mary visited. Martha tried to make sure everything was perfect. This passage has to be used in tandem with the passage that comes before it, which is the parable of the Good Samaritan. We know that parable, right? I could read it to you, but we know the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the way that story ends is Jesus telling the man who says, "Who is my neighbor?" He says, "Go and be like the Good Samaritan. Go and be like the one who helped the one who had been wronged. Go and do." Jesus says to this man, "Go and do." What does he say to Martha? Marcia. Too many M's here. It gets rough sometimes. What does he say to Martha? Sit and listen. Go and do. And sit and listen. And I think that if we were to go to Jesus and say, "Jesus, which is it? Is it the Good Samaritan or is it Mary sitting and listening?" Jesus would say, "Yes. It's both." And there needs to be a balance in that. If we sit and listen all the time, it is great, but we're not really applying anything that we're learning, are we? And if you don't do what you say you know how to do, I would question whether or not you really know how to do it. It's when someone shows it that we know that they can do it, right? It's when somebody lives something else. It is one thing to say, "I can build a house." It is another thing to step out and build that house. And I would say a third thing, for someone to live in it, right? It is another thing to say, "You know what? I can build this house. I don't even need to study and learn and to go to work." It's both. We sit, we listen, we go, we serve. And up until we repainted, we had the words "deep and wide" on the wall. They're coming back. We just haven't gotten there yet. Deep and wide. Sitting and listening. It is the opportunity to grow a deep relationship with Jesus. He knocked, she answered, she sat there and learned. She put everything else to the side. Mary knew the custom. She knew that they probably would want to eat at some point. She knew what being a good hostess meant. She chose to sit and listen. Seeing all of the other activities that were good, and yet she chose to sit and listen. Martha knew she could sit and listen, but she chose to do everything else instead. And it is this balance of both, of sitting and listening and going and serving. I want to be real careful because at times the church has been great at sitting and listening. Teach us, give us another Bible study, give us a book to read. What should we be reading? How much time should we be spending in prayer? The church has been good at sitting. But it needs to be countered by the serving. We absolutely need both. And when we serve, we need to take time to sit afterwards. Does that make sense? Because if we don't do them together, we end up running on empty. We end up running with nothing left to live. And we can work and work and work and do good things in the name of Jesus, do good things for Jesus, just like Martha was doing, and yet we will miss the point. And in the same token, if all we do is sit and listen, we will all go hungry. Now, some of us can last a little longer than others, but we will all go hungry at some point. Right? It is across the board. I would throw in here to consider Matthew 25, verses 34 through 40. The king will say to those on the right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Do not walk out of here thinking that the only thing Jesus wants us to do is to sit at his feet and listen. And do not walk out of here thinking, "I've got to earn my way," because Jesus wants a relationship. Do you understand? It is absolutely both. And if we are going to do this Christ following well, We need both. It's impossible to do it well without listening and without serving. Serving and studying, work and rest, visiting with people and visiting with Jesus. My hope for each one of us this week is that we will spend time sitting with Jesus and time serving others. If you're not sure where to go, or if you're looking at your life right now saying, you know what, I have done a lot of sitting, maybe it's time to get involved. Or maybe you're looking at your life saying, you know what, I have been serving way too much. I have been giving and giving and giving. I have been helping others across the board, and right now, I need time with Jesus. Because this balance thing, I feel like I'm running on empty. I feel like I've got nothing left to give. And the only one who can really make a difference in my life is Jesus. And if you're not sure, we'll sit down and make a list. I'll try and help you figure it out because it's important to have a balance. We want both sitting and serving, working and resting. So my hope for you this week is that you will really put that into practice and that you'll spend time listening and growing and finding those opportunities to rest and to serve. Let's close in prayer. Father, we just thank you for this time together. We thank you for this lesson that we learned from Mary and Martha. God, as we read this story, we do not judge them because we know we have been there. God, we have done these things. We have said these things. We have lashed out at you and said, don't you care that I am doing all of these things in your name? Don't you care that I am doing it myself? Oh God, we know that you care. We know that you love us. We know that you have proven that love and your faithfulness time after time after time. Father, forgive us for our short-sightedness. Forgive us for our selfishness. Forgive us for our ability to work ourselves to death. Father, forgive us for not doing balance well. Help us, God. Help us to rest with you, to learn from you, to grow with you, and help us to love your other children. Help us to love others the way we love ourselves. Father, we're reminded we just can't do it on our own. Every time we try, we will lean one way or the other, and we'll end up missing the mark. So, Father, we just pray for your guidance, for your wisdom, for your Holy Spirit to be at work within our life and to show us the way each and every step. It's in Jesus' name we pray.